you can't run all the time. Like, it's impossible. I know we talk like we can do that, and it's like, I'm grinding and I'm going. Listen, like, it's impossible because sometimes all the work that you've done got you up the mountain, but now you're carrying a big pack and you're running uphill. So it's okay if you have to walk or hike that rather than run it.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of The Future is Here, where we talk about leadership principles that you need to lead this next generation. I'm here with my man, Tommy Nixon.
That's right.
My name is Robert Aboides, and we are going to be talking about today something that I think is near and dear to a lot of young people's hearts is, how do I prioritize my time? I mean, I don't know, this is just my personal observation. I see young people as being some of the busiest people in any generation that I've been a part of. I mean, I thought I was busy as a young person, but I think there's a different kind of busyness. Like I remember as a young person in my 20s trying to build my career, I was a workaholic, and I spent a lot of time, but I was in one place, busy at one place.
Yeah.
What I see now is young people being busy in all kinds of different places. Like, they got so much going on in their life. Yeah. Sometimes just to be honest, it stresses me out watching how much stuff they do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think all the different factors that are just simply the phone. Yeah. The phone by itself. That's true. With all the apps and social media, like 40 hours a week. I know that some people spend on that, plus. And so they're at a different place with the things that they're carrying and the access they have to information and knowledge. And so today we really want to talk about, what does it look like, whether you're young or you're old? I think everybody needs to be better about how they use your time, and how do you actually prioritize what you should be doing. Now, this is specifically in the work that you do. We're going to be talking from the perspective of the work that you're called into in your leadership capacity. How do you plan that? You can take this as well and use it to your personal life, which all matters because you only have one life. So we use some of these principles, and we're going to give you guys a breakdown of how to actually map out how to prioritize your time. And you could use that in any area. You could use it in your marriage, or as a parent, or your home life, your personal life, and your work life. We're going to be really talking about specifically your work life.
Yeah. And there are actually a lot of tools out there that you can use to prioritize. I mean, there's one of them is pretty popular is the Eisenhower matrix, right? Which talks about putting things in like urgent and important categories, right? Not important, non-essential stuff. So there's plenty of tools out there. But at the end of the day, none of those tools work if you don't actually put a value on prioritizing the work you do.
Yeah.
And I think that as leaders, sometimes we think that everything we do is important. I mean, there is no priority. Everything's a top priority. Yeah. And the reality is, when everything is a top priority, nothing's a priority, right? Things start falling through the cracks, and you get busy doing all this activity, and we talk a lot about, Tommy, being strategic in our leadership.
Yes.
We also need to be strategic in our time management.
Absolutely.
Right? We need to be strategic about how we prioritize and what it is that we should be focused on, because there is a point of diminishing returns.
Absolutely.
At some point, your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit, your heart is just going to give out.
So I'll give you young leaders a heads up. You will work your butt off in your 20s and your 30s. Robert did. I did. I mean, you are going to charge. You get upwards around 40, things change a little bit, right? So if you can learn how to be healthy and pace well, prioritize well, in your 20s and your 30s, and then especially as you move into kind of some of those sweet spots, 40, 45 into your 50s, you'll have a much better impact on this world and be a much better leader. And so here's a couple of ways that you can start to begin to prioritize your time. The first is you have to be clear about your why. So when you start to cut things, because this is what you should be doing, you start cutting things going, that's actually not something I should be doing. You have to be clear about your why. You have to understand your purpose and your goals. Like, where am I trying to get to? You have to identify what truly matters to you as a leader and what's important in that season. So you might have competing values and actually roles in your role. So there might be some times where I need to really focus on program management or design at a certain point. And so my percentage is going to change between the development and raising money and doing this, because I can't raise more money until I actually give time to create the program and go, this is what we're doing. Yeah. And therefore I need to go raise the money for it. So those switch, right? But that can change back. So you also have to understand, okay, clear why, what am I supposed to be doing and what will get me there? Right now, what do I need to be doing? And then you focus on tasks that align with your overall mission and values. And we actually do something called strategic storyline, which we talked about on the podcast. And mostly we're helping leaders figure out what
to focus on.
What to actually focus on. And a lot of them realize that when they're clear about their mission and vision, there's a lot of things that they do that don't make sense for them to give time and energy to that.
Yeah.
And so this is the area to be cautious about. Hey, just because you do a lot of activity and you're busy doesn't mean you're being impactful or leading well.
Yeah. I think there's a tendency to engage in activities that are maybe, I don't know, easy, low-hanging fruit as a leader I'm talking, but not
make you feel good about yourself.
Personally, make you feel good, or that bring you a lot of accolades, right? There's this thing that I've seen in leadership where, because right now let me just put it this way, there's great opportunities for leaders, for gifted leaders, gifted speakers, right? People who have that people want to hear. So there's a lot of opportunity beyond just your organization.
Oh yeah.
But one of the things I do tend to see a lot is that as leaders get quote unquote successful, they begin to spend more time where they're wanted rather than where they're needed. And I think that as a leader, you have to be able to prioritize those things, right? It might feel better to go where you're wanted, and you might convince yourself that you're actually needed there.
Sure.
But the reality is, we're a dime a dozen in terms of platforms and things like that, right? It's not like the platform's going to die if we're not on it, right? There's plenty of other people to fill it. So I think it's important for us as leaders, like for me, the big picture prioritization, the first step for me is to understand, like, is this something that am I needed here, or am I just, do it because I'm wanted there?
Right.
So be clear about what it is that you're trying to focus on and why. Again, going back to the why, right? Why is it that I feel like I want to do this, or I need to spend time on this? But I think the second thing is then just be clear about kind of the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Because again, we talk a lot about this in our strategic storyline and in other places, that problem solving, I think, is one of the most important things that we do as a leader. So when you look at the span of your activities and all of the things that take up your time and how much energy you're giving to those things, I think you need to ask yourself the question, what problem is getting solved by me participating in all of these things?
Yes.
And if it's not really clear what it is that you're accomplishing, what problem you're solving, I would say it's time to do some prioritization work.
That's good. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good example of this is I'm in that stage right now where the last 5 years, I've had to put myself to a lot of work to building up different departments in the organization, or giving time and leadership to others so they could build their departments. And I'm just getting at a time where my gifting, I have gifts to be on stage. I have forward-facing giftings like speaking and all those kind of things. Well, I've put that on the back burner for a long time because I'm like, I need to give to these spaces. We need to have a better development department. We need to have a better vision. I need to communicate. I got to be here for the staff. And now we're at a place 5 years in where I'm like, okay, I think what's best now is outward facing. Can I go speak these places? Can we write the book? Can we, all those kind of things. But I had to prioritize those. And that took 5 years to get to the place that I'm at now. And that's what we mean by, that's what it could look like. So
I think too, Tommy, that you bring up a really good point. And I think maybe this is something that scares leaders when we talk about prioritizing, right? Prioritizing in the right way may actually lead to a loss of opportunities.
Oh, absolutely.
And the question is, are you willing to do that?
Yeah.
Are you willing to reprioritize, to lose those opportunities because you're not spending time on that in order to play what I call the long game, right? to look far ahead enough, to be visionary enough to say, look, I know where I want to take this organization. And even though right now there's these opportunities that we could take advantage of if I just spend my time on them, I'm going to choose to do this over here as a higher priority, even if those opportunities go away. Because I know in the long run, we're going to be better off as an organization. We're going to be healthier. We're going to be stronger. We're going to be set up for the future.
And this is where that type of leadership comes in, where I'm looking at, I want to do what's best and spend my time what's best for the overall org. How many birds, this is one of my favorite things, how many birds can I kill with one stone? Yeah. So if I choose this, my name will get out there more. I will become more well-known. I'll get more speaking gigs. I'll get paid more. My family will benefit. Okay, cool. If I don't, and I sacrifice people asking me to go do this and that over here, and I got to spend 5 years doing all the org stuff, all the stuff that's not fun, but it helps the overall movement. It helps the leaders that are on the team better. Those are the type of prioritization that we're talking about. And I'm telling you, when you're an unselfish leader and you again go back to the consensus and you ask people to come in on that, we can go, this is why. It also helps too why when there is a shift, I can actually articulate how me writing books, how me going out and is actually helping everybody else. And it's not one of those straw arguments where it's like, look, man, you just need to be okay with this because I need to get mine, right? There's a different conversation happening there. So the next one is, okay, so be clear about your why, be clear about the problem you're solving. I wrote, be clear about your gifting and your weakness. Now, what I mean by that is when you start prioritizing stuff, you have to look around at your team and go, who's best suited to do this work?
Yeah.
So if you're not really clear about, I know I'm super gifted and I can do this, here's where the prioritization gets tough, where you start looking at, can somebody do that as well? Is there somebody that's better than you at that in your org that you need to elevate to go and do that piece? Why are you spending all your time? You might feel wanted and good about this, but it's actually not your strong.
Right.
And that one comes, say you're the leader, but you're actually not that good of a speaker. Okay, that's okay. Get somebody else on stage. And this is actually, let's get real really quick. This is the problem when you have a gifted communicator in a church that thinks that they're a gifted leader because they're a gifted communicator.
Yeah, I think we had an episode on that.
We had a whole episode on that, right? And it's like, hey, just be a gifted communicator and let somebody else lead. That's not actually your role. So when I say, you got to be clear about your gifting, your weakness, you got to be really honest about, where am I spending my time? Is it where I should be? And are there other people that have those giftings that can be taking those things on? Is that part of their leadership development piece? So that's what I mean by that.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for leaders, the ones at the top of the organization, spending less time on things that the rest of the organization could handle. Yeah. And maybe even better at.
Yeah.
But I think we just feel, I don't know, it seems like, especially since I moved from corporate to ministry, because in corporate, I feel like you have pretty clear lanes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have a job title, you have
some
job
of those structures we talked about.
Yeah, some of the structures we talked about in one of our last episodes. It's really, really clear what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, within that lane, I have a lot of flexibility and ownership of that. But when I moved into full-time professional ministry, I felt like those lanes got blurred. Yeah. Like there were no lines for me. And so you almost feel like, well, I have to be all things to all people, right? All the time.
Yeah.
I have to do all of these things because they need me. And if I'm not doing them, then they're not getting done. But in fact, that actually creates a culture where you become the most important part of that organization.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily the case, right? That I think that there's equal parts importance on the team and others, right, that can bring gifted. And again, it's weird to me because as leaders, aren't we trying to hire really gifted and quality people who can do a bunch of stuff that we don't know how to do?
You would think so, but yeah.
But it feels like more we hire people who can just kind of get the menial work done or just keep the wheels turning while I do, all the big stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think, and we're kind of getting into the idea of, even we talked about in a previous episode, empowerment versus delegation and all of that. But really, it is about prioritization. It is about the way I like to think of it is, how can I maximize who God created me to be? Where can I spend the most time and have the most impact and add the most value?
That's right. Yeah.
That's what that's the lens through which I
love that.
Take my assignments, because anything else, and that's not to say that I don't end up taking on things that I shouldn't. I still do that.
Yeah, sure.
But then when I start feeling the weight of all of that, I go, oh, what did I do that for? Why did I take that stuff on? I should have just empowered someone else to do that, right? Or delegated or whatever. And so I think it's good to constantly be in this mindset of prioritization and asking the question, am I doing the things that maximize, my value and my impact and my giftings?
Absolutely. And so how you prioritize your time, be clear about your why, be clear about the problem you're solving, be clear about your gifting and weaknesses, and then be clear in your capacity, season, and pacing. What we mean by this is, look, your capacity changes. Like, I'm older, my capacity has changed. I've grown. There's been wisdom, there's been understanding, there's been skill set growth. Like, I might be at different capacities. What can I handle? I used to have 2 kids, and then there was 3. Now it's 5. So things change. People go through sickness. There's just a lot. So just be honest with your capacity at any given point. Communicate that, and then prioritize accordingly. I think also be aware of seasons. A lot of times I would move into a new season, didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And in kind of some dumb ways. Like, Tommy, you didn't think that going from 4 to 5 kids would be a season change? I'm like, no, I didn't. I just thought there's a lot of kids and it'll be fine. Huge season change. I didn't realize when my wife or I turned a certain age, midlife, like things change. I didn't realize when we moved houses, when I moved jobs, when friendships shifted, when somebody passed away, like all these different seasons, they matter. And so you want to be clear about, what season am I in? Am I in a season of rest? Am I in a season of pulling back, or am I in a season of pushing forward? Whatever that. Just know that you can't always be in a season of pushing forward all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a very churchy evangelical thing. It doesn't work like that. Just look at the seasons.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think recently too, we entered a season where we felt like we needed to be part of something that was really big kingdom goal, right? Big kingdom organization. And we got invited into that, and we did it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But the prioritization conversation was like, is this really maximizing who we are? I mean, we had to have a lot of conversations.
Yeah, we did.
About, man, do we stay in this thing? It's taking a lot of, again, I bring it up because we're talking about being clear in our capacity, season, and pacing. Now, it was a place where we were heavily wanted. They wanted us to be part of it. They kept like, man, I don't want to say begging, because that feels weird, but
yeah.
But they were saying, hey, you guys are valued. We really
vehemently asking.
Yeah, like, we really want you to be part of this. And initially we thought, oh yeah, this is a priority for us. But here's the thing: we realized that in reality, that really wasn't a priority. It felt good to be part of it, and it felt good to be part of something bigger. But we realized that really what God had been doing, kind of underneath all of that in the organization, was pointing us in a different direction.
Right.
And so we could have, the typical thing to do would be like, okay, well, we can do both.
Yeah.
Let's just grind it out. Like, we can do both. But I think we saw that was going to require a lot more of our time and energy, and it was going to pull us away from the thing that we're called to do every day, which is lead this organization, right?
Yeah.
And so we had to make the hard decision of prioritizing that basically down to 0.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, we got to get out of that because we have other things that need our time, our energy, and our resources.
And the way that we explain that is, we could spend a lot of our time and energy over here and move the dial maybe 15%. I think that was generous. Or we could spend all of our energy over here and move the dial 100% for our vision and mission and our context and our people. And that's how but it took a lot to understand that some things had changed, some things have shifted, and we made that decision. The last thing I'll say on this about be clear about capacity, season, and pacing is the pacing part. You can't run all the time. Like, it's impossible. I know we talk like we can do that, and it's like, I'm grinding and I'm going. Listen, like, it's impossible, because sometimes all the work that you've done got you up the mountain, but now you're carrying a big pack and you're running uphill. So it's okay if you have to walk or hike that rather than run it. And when you get new people on your team, they might not have the same capacity as you. And a good leader will slow down and make sure the whole group is moving at a pace that everyone can move until you can all start pacing going faster. So pacing is actually a really huge one that most leaders don't think about, but that's a really important one to understand. What pace can you run right now? My mom always said you can do anything for a certain amount of time. So what season are you in? Where's your capacity? And that should help you understand how are you pacing and how are you doing that for those you're leading.
What's interesting is, as you're talking, I'm seeing that pacing, which is something we should all be thinking about as leaders for our organization, for our staff, right? I think is what you're saying. But in order to pace well, you have to prioritize well.
Absolutely.
If you're not prioritizing, you're not pacing.
Right. You're just running aimlessly.
Right. You're just whatever. Your pace is basically a super fast pace, and you're hoping everybody else can keep up. And the process, you're burning people out. They're falling, they're skinning their knees, like all this stuff.
And you're just like, you're shaming them for not being able to keep
you might stop and pick them up and go, let's go, let's keep going, right? But I think that prioritization is a great tool to actually use so that you can pace you well personally and I think organizationally.
So here's what happened. This is probably last year. And some seasons had changed for me, capacity, and I was looking at pacing. And I asked Robert, I said, Rob, can you help me think through this? I've identified with my executive assistant, and her name's Jamie, and I identified here, I know these are the core things that I do in my job here. One, I had to identify what are those core things.
Yeah.
Were there too many things? And then I had asked you, I said, can you sit with me? And I invited you in to say, can you help me prioritize what should I be doing now? Because I feel a little lost. I'm overwhelmed. I don't think I can do all this. And you led me through a process. And so with our remaining time, let's just walk people through that process so that they could do this at home or at their work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those that know me know that I have this love affair with whiteboards.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So don't put me ever in front of a whiteboard because I'll start writing and ideating. But we just got in front of this whiteboard and literally we started with what you just said. Said, hey, Tommy, what are the core things that you are required to do from the organization's perspective? I think we did personal too, but let's just focus on from the organizational, right?
Yeah.
So you have like these core things like partnership development, right? Things like fundraising. There was content creation that you had to do. You had to do leadership development, not just with the staff, but there was an expectation that you were doing leadership development with other leaders. There was strategy and vision for the organization. You had to spend time doing that, right? You had to represent and be an advocate for UIWI in a lot of different spaces because these other organizations and spaces were asking for your time to be part of that. We have a board that needed your time, right? You need to process. We've had the same board for a long time and you wanted to add new people and bring them in and really rethink, okay, what's the board involvement, right? So board development. And then there's just the general organizational management and development that needed to happen, right? Like kind of like the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
So we kind of started with that, like break down your role in the organization into what I always call them rocks, right? And what are the big rocks that you have to move?
And in that, what we did too, Friends is Sweat, we looked at it in seasons. We said for the next 6 months, we actually named the time frame for this so that we can, at the end of 6 months, relook at it. Are these the same priorities?
Right.
And so for me, what Robert just shared, those were my 8, as the CEO of Urban Youth Workers Institute, those were the 8 things that I'm like, these are the
big rocks that you were carrying.
These are the big rocks that I need to do. And so then what did we do?
Yeah. So then, and again, I think that's really important. I don't want people to miss that, that we set a time frame for that because priorities will change.
Oh, yeah.
The landscape changes, your life changes, the work changes, right? The requirements change. So we have to constantly be aware of the landscape that we're operating in to see if changes are going to force us to reprioritize. But all things being equal, we said, okay, for the next 6 months, these are the things that you're going to focus on. Now, the next question is, okay, what is the top thing that we need you to focus on the most?
Yeah.
And let's assign a percentage of time to that over the next, let's look at 30 days at a time, right? In 30-day increments, what's the percentage of time that you have to allocate to that?
So for that, just so you guys understand what we're talking about. So I'll walk through them really quick. Partnerships, 5%. I said, and some of this was arbitrary. When you first do this, you're like, I think it's this.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You can start off like that. So I said partnerships, 5%, development, 40%, content creation, 30%. And again, that might seem funny because you're like, content creation, it's because of the season UIWI is in.
Yeah, we needed a lot of content.
It's not going to always be at 30%. But development will always be at least 40%. So leadership development, 10%, strategy and vision, 3%, UIWR representation, 7%. Again, that's a season thing. Board development, 2%, and org management and development, 3%. That all equals 100%.
Yeah. And again, let me stress that when you look at some of these percentages on the lower percentage side, like strategy and vision, right? For example, and you're like, oh, you're only giving 3% of that? Yes, but remember, there are other people in the organization that might be giving 50% of their time during this season to that we don't need Tommy to be speaking into strategy and vision, because strategy and vision was clear, at least for the next 6 months. And so we were all spending a lot of time executing on strategy and vision that we had already developed.
Yeah.
So it didn't need you to be, giving 50% of your time to that. So it doesn't mean that organizationally, only 3% of our time is being given to that, for example. It means that for Tommy, we only needed him to give 3% of his time to that. So I think that's really important. But what we do then is once you have those, you kind of identify the percentage of time that you need to spend. And again, look at it in 30-day increments, just a month at a time. What's the percentage of time I need to spend on those? Then you translate that into number of days. Okay. So what is, 30% of a month is going to be, okay, not for 9 days out of the month or 12 days out of the month, I got to do development. Right.
That's right.
And so now here's the beautiful thing about that. Now, for a month, you can figure out, okay, how many days does that work out per week should I be spending? Right? How many hours does that equal to? And now you can begin to calendar your time.
Yeah, and you do blocks. So friends, if you're not using your calendar as a leader, start. Because you have to, what you write down, that's what you do. And so use your calendar, how many days per month? Now, obviously, it's not like I go, okay, all day, every day, or for 12 days, I'm only doing development. I break it up. But at the end of the month and at the end of 6 months, I look at it and I go, how much time am I actually doing? This is also an accountability. So when I go, man, we're not raising as much money. Oh, okay. Well, Tommy, you said you were going to do 12 full days of development. What kind of effort are you giving to it? And if I'm like, oh, I said I need to do 40%. I'm doing more like 20%.
Yeah.
What's taking up my time? And that's how you, again, prioritize and to keep accountability.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you think about, for example, the example of development where you're spending 12 days per month, over the course of 6 months, that's 72 days of development time that you spent.
And if you're putting in the time and effort, you'll see the result. Yeah. But if you're not.
Absolutely. So then after we calculate the days per month, then we look at, okay, what do we mean by development? What's the practical work that makes up development? And again, I like to think in major movements, major big rocks kind of thing. So the big rock of development has a few smaller rocks that make that up.
Yep.
Major donor engagement, campaigns, finding donors in new cities, right? At the time we were hiring a new manager director. There's a new system that we were implementing. So those were kind of like the top 5 practical work. And so now you can take those things and schedule them out in your calendar over those 12 days per month that you had to do.
And think about how your life would change if you already knew all the work you need to do, 1 in the month and then 2 in the next 6 months.
Yeah. No.
It wouldn't feel so overwhelming because you've already chopped it up. How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. Right. And so it's the same deal. And so we did that. We do that practical work, like smaller big rocks, not like the specific detail, but
tasks.
Yeah.
Even if you have to think of it in terms of like major projects or things that you have on your plate with regard to development or content creation. And then we look at, from the practical work, we look at the process, like what are the specific ways that I'm going to do major donor engagement, for example. Maybe there's a dinner I need to plan. Maybe I need to make certain number of personal contacts. So you're kind of taking a top-down approach to breaking this down. But I think what's really helpful in this is that we typically start on the other side. usually when we're prioritizing or planning or scheduling or calendaring, we start with all the tasks and we start like, oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. And you have all this tasks. And then you don't really ever figure out, well, how many hours is that? What's the priority with regard to
feels
other things?
Overwhelming.
Yeah. If I just have a task list of 100 things that I have to do, I don't really know if I'm moving things along or am I working on the right things, I'm prioritizing. So starting with this top down, like what are the big rocks, and then breaking it down into smaller rocks. Actually, when you complete those smaller tasks, you actually collectively are completing and moving the big rocks. So you think about the process, but then here's another piece that gets overlooked and is really important.
This is,
okay, what am I expecting to get out of that?
Yes.
What is the outcome
The outcomes.
of this 40% of my time? What is the outcome that I want to see as a result of my prioritization, right? So if I'm spending 40% of my time on development over these 6 months, what I want to see is $1.45 million raised.
Yeah,
okay?
and these are smart. These are smart.
Yeah, smart goals.
They're very clear. They're measurable. All that. So,
and that's important because if you're saying something is a priority, but one, you don't know why it's a priority, you just know that you have to do it, and then you don't really know what you're trying to accomplish as a result of it, then that work actually doesn't feel fruitful at all. And so you're going to be feeling unfulfilled and all of that. And some of this, not all of these things are fun. I know you don't enjoy all of these things, right? But when, as a leader, these are things that we know we have to do in order to move the organization forward. And so it's important to prioritize them and to use a structure like this, to prioritize our work and then take those priorities and calendar them out so that I'm really clear on what I'm doing each day.
So if you don't want to feel overwhelmed and you want to know, okay, what is it? This process that we're talking about, it takes time.
Yeah.
Like, and it is helpful to get another person, just like Robert did with me, like, hey, could you, just as a sounding board, like, is that what you really do? Or should you be doing that? But as you prioritize, you can use this tool and the process that we outline for you. I guarantee you'll feel, if you get through this process, you'll feel a lot better. Okay. Either one, you'll be like, that's manageable. I can do that. Or something's got to get cut. Like if you got 15 things on here that it's too much. It's too much. I mean, 8 was kind of stretching it for me where I'm like, that's 8 things. But I also knew like things like the board work is really like 1 day a month. Like it wasn't. And so but it feels like more because I'm like, oh, I gotta get ready for the board meeting. I gotta get more board members on this. Okay, Tommy, can you take 1 day out of a month and do it? When I put it like that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I totally can if I set it to my calendar and then I do what I say I'm going to do.
Yeah. And I would say too, we didn't really do this as part of, your work, but I think that's one thing that's really important is you have to give margin a priority as well.
Yeah, that's
like
so good.
Build in margin into this process, right? And whatever that margin, you're like, I want to have 10% margin in my time. Okay, cool.
I love that.
Put margin and add 10% and have that be one of the things that you prioritize. And margin for me is the space where I'm allowing God to move and to breathe into my life because I need to be ready for the unexpected. But if I pack my calendar with all this activity, with all of these things where everything is a priority and God tries to move, I might just be like, no, God, sorry, I'm already too busy. I can't listen to you because I can't take that on.
I mean, a really great way to look at this too, friends, is when you look at your calendar, if you're using one, which you should be, and you have all day, you have meetings and there's no space between those meetings, that means you have no margin. And it's not good for you. You're going to not make good decisions. You're not going to be filled with the fruit of the Spirit, honestly. If you're packed like that, you're not going to have patience.
Oh, yeah.
And so we would just encourage you in that. And so, friends, I hope today's been really helpful. I hope you use this tool. We should, in the notes, maybe we can put
we'll put a template down there.
Actually, you know what? The template will be on our website. If you go to our leadership library, we'll put that template on there.
Absolutely.
I think we could do that.
Yeah,
right?
we could do that.
Yep. So we'll make sure that template's on there. You can use that, download that, and use that. I hope that this will help you be a healthier leader so that you can better lead those, especially who are coming up in this next generation. Much love to you guys. Make sure you subscribe, you share, you like, and we'll see you guys on the next time, the Futures Here podcast. Peace.
Peace.